Welcome to Rising Woman Leaders. I'm your host, Meredith Ram, and I believe the time has come for women to share their gifts, their voice, and their stories. I love seeing women spiritually and financially empowered, thriving in their life's work, and doing what they love every day. I've gathered a community of women living their dreams to tell us their stories and inspire us to step into more courage, self-love, and feminine leadership. If you like this podcast, follow me on Instagram at Rising Woman Leaders and sign up for email updates at risingwomanleaders.com. Now get cozy with a journal and a cup of tea. I hope you enjoy today's show. I'm here today with Lee Noto, who is an intimacy coach and Bliss Expert. She works with ambitious, high-powered women at the top of their game, go from burnout to bliss so that they can regain their sense of self without compromising their success. At the height of her success, fueled by hustle, she found herself in a state of complete and utter burnout, confronted by cystic breakouts, full body hives, and facial paralysis. This wake-up call led her to mastermind her own journey to bliss, using a set of practices that are now the cornerstone of her signature transformational system called the Bliss Method. Lee now coaches clients one-on-one and leads workshops and talks around the world. She incorporates aspects of Eastern and Western modalities, such as neuroscience, psychology, tantric philosophy, various meditative practices, Reiki, and more. She studied with numerous teachers on subjects including conscious and sacred sexuality, meditation, breath work, and transformational change work. Her unique approach allows her to create a safe space for clients to step into their power and create a bliss-filled life. Thanks for being here, Lee.
Thank you so much for having me, Meredith. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, and one of the things that really stuck out to me, and what I do know about your story is just, I also walked a similar path. And before we started recording, we were just talking about New York. I was out there and I went through a similar journey of just like my body really telling me, hey, you're like on overdrive. And I think that energy of achievement and ambition runs pretty high, especially out there in the city. But I'd love to hear more of your story and just what kind of job you were working in, what your life looked like when things were really hard, and also just like what was happening with your body that led you to make a shift.
Sure. And the funny thing is I guess it's funny in retrospect. It wasn't funny at the time. I didn't know things were breaking down. I wasn't open to seeing the breakdown that was happening in front of my eyes. And it's so interesting to think back on that journey now. But where I was about 2 years ago in 2017 was just coming out of what I thought was going to be a very long-term relationship. And this former partner ended up leaving and moving to California, and thus we ended the relationship. And there were a lot of other, complications that happened amidst that. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? I made myself, quote unquote, perfect for this person. It was the epitome of the scene from The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, if you've ever seen the show, where she wakes up before her husband laying in bed. And she freshens herself up, she puts her makeup on, she takes her rollers out so that her husband never knows how she looks without makeup on and with curlers in her hair. Mm. And that is what I did in this relationship for over a year, both literally and metaphorically. And it was this people-pleasing strive for perfection because I thought that was what was going to keep him interested and keep him around. And when that relationship ended, I completely stuffed my emotions. I didn't acknowledge them at all. And I threw myself into my work, which was a corporate job at the time in New York City. And I was working like crazy. I was in a graduate program to become a coach. And then I was also in an apprenticeship, and I was working out obsessively. I was meal prepping and planning. And so there was literally zero time to process any emotion because I was falling apart at the seams. And if I had slowed down for even 1 second, everything would go to smithereens. And I kept doing this over and over and over again. And I don't know why I didn't stop to think why cystic breakouts were occurring on my face. And one day I woke up and the left side of my face was paralyzed. And I thought, well, you know what? I'll sleep it off. This is no big deal. The sleeping it off did not work. So I went to a walk-in clinic, and it was a very quick diagnosis of Bell's palsy. And I was out the door with a prescription for 3 different pills. And I was sitting in the Walgreens pharmacy about to fill the prescription and was like, okay, source, universe, there's got to be another way. Like, this is my turning point. I know there's got to be another way. And so I had them cancel the prescription. And for the next few months, I worked with 2 Chinese medicine doctors to undergo intensive rounds of facial paralysis with electrical stimulation, with really intense facial massages, which were not pleasant at all. And then I was on a course of Chinese herbs. I completely changed my diet. I had to do a lot of deep work to understand what beliefs about myself caused this to happen in the first place. And that was really the turning point of everything that informed all of the work that I'm doing now. And so while I wouldn't wish that journey upon anyone, I definitely wouldn't take it back, and I wouldn't change a thing, because it is a large part of why I am who I am now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And part of my journey too was my skin really breaking out and having those like painful cystic acne. And for me too, it came out in chronic body pain. And I think, yeah, just what you were saying about there was no space to feel your emotions. Was that part of the journey, once you slowed down or once you started feeling the emotions, that it started helping with the symptoms you were having?
Yeah, it did. One of the emotions that I have struggled my whole life to access, for various reasons, be they cultural, familial, societal, especially as a woman, is anger. And anger a lot of times will manifest in facial breakouts. And, it's still something that I've been on a journey to explore and relate to in loving ways, because it's been quite easy for me to look at a breakout and become frustrated with myself, or become frustrated at the condition of my skin. And as I'm learning to experience emotions, feel them, relate to them, express them in, safe and contained ways where they're not spewing out at other people, it has really created a lot of spaciousness that was just really jam-packed before. And I've gone through a number of my own and facilitated ceremonies and journeys where I've gotten to really experience powerful emotional release. And it has been hands down one of the things that has served my health and my well-being the most in this journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know meditation and breath work in particular are really powerful and in that emotional release. And I wonder if you want to share just how do you express and feel and move through emotions now?
Yeah, so I've got a few different methods that I regularly turn to. Breath work is one of them. I've loved breath work and sound work. And so even, whether I'm shouting the same sound over and over again in order to provoke emotion that I know is there, but feels stuck, or I feel sort of stoic towards it or numb, I'll use sound. So I might shout out, ha, and I'll shout out, ha, over and over and over again at the top of my lungs. And given that I live in a Brooklyn apartment, I will do it into a pillow. And so breath, sound, movement has been another huge one for moving energy for me. So whether that is more linear movement, like actual working out, or intuitive, ecstatic dance, even sensual movement, and really having a series of like self-pleasure rituals. And, in that regard, self-pleasure, even sexual self-pleasure, has been a huge gateway for me to access emotion, because in the work that I was doing previous to the work that I do now, I did a lot of work in the realm of sex and intimacy and working with sexual energy. And by creating a really intentional, sacred self-pleasure practice, I mean, I've had moments where I've been in utter laughter, in, tears that I was bawling, crying, and then crying and laughing at the same time. And it was, it looked like something out of a movie. And so that's been another really valuable tool for me to access emotion as well as pleasure.
Mm. Yeah. And as you started to find these tools and were healing, I'm curious just what happened with the journey of your corporate job. Did that just fall away? Was it a conscious choice to leave? How did you make that decision?
Yeah. There's actually a part of me that's scared that if it had not fallen away in the way it did, that I could still be there. Mm. So it's a very cosmic story. I was, mentally half there, half not. I was already certified as a coach and was coaching part-time. I was also in an apprenticeship based around Tantra and Tantric philosophy. And so I had this other set of passions outside of this corporate job. And in October of 2017, I went to Peru for a 10-day intensive there and went on just the spiritual journey of a lifetime. And I remember being in one of the ceremonies and saying to myself, I wish to let go of that which is not truly me. And I had a sense at the time what that could mean, but I didn't fully know what it meant. And I returned back from Peru on October 31st of 2017. On November 2nd, I woke up to work from home that day. And before I got to my laptop, I remember doing a meditation and saying, what would my life be like if I felt truly free? And the first thing that came up was, well, I probably wouldn't have a corporate job. I was like, okay, well, if that were the case, how would I generate income? What would this look like logistically? And I started to play through that in my mind. And by the end of that meditation, I remember feeling a sense of serenity, like, okay, sure, that could happen. And as I opened my laptop that day, I saw there was a new meeting on my calendar. So I video conferenced in, and it was my former manager, her peer, and another woman. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I know what's about to happen right now. And 5 minutes into the conversation, they said, while you were away in Peru, as you know, we've been restructuring and we've restructured the team and your role has been made redundant. Your last day will be December 1st. And I was like, oh my gosh, I literally just asked the universe for this in, not so many ways. And now it's happening. And the kicker of it all is once I got off the call, I had a huge emotional release because I was just in awe of how this had happened. And I was waiting for the severance documentation to come in from HR. And the woman kept checking with me, has it arrived to your inbox yet? I said, no. When it arrived finally, like an hour later, to my personal and work inbox, it arrived to both at 11:11 a.m. And I was like, you know what? This is just too much.
There was some divine orchestration happening.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how it happened. The exit from corporate.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. We are really powerful manifestors. And wow, it must have been a shock. And at the same time, that's probably a pretty good way to leave, to get a severance and to be able to think about your next steps. And that question, what would my life look like if I were truly free? It's really, really interesting that you say that, because just this weekend I was at a yoga festival gathering up here in Northern California, and a class that I went to on Sunday morning, she had us turn to a partner and to talk for like 5 minutes each, that exact question. And it's just really been on my heart and my mind. And I already feel some restructuring happening, which is like not easy. But it's like, I don't know if you're familiar at all with Kali, the goddess.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
She's all about just like cutting away what no longer serves. And it can be difficult and uncomfortable. And it's like that restructuring, so there can be a more solid foundation that's in deeper alignment.
Yes.
Yeah. Anything else you want to just share about that before I move on? Just like, is that something that you work on with your clients? Like asking them, what would it look like for if I were truly free? Or
yeah, that's such a huge question, and there's so many ways we can go with it. And, to the reference to Kali, I've experienced that myself in the past number of months, this utter slash and burn, a phoenix rising sort of transformation. And something that I've been really playing with recently is, what would it look like if transformation didn't have to be painful, if it didn't have to be arduous, if it didn't have to take a long time, if I didn't have to feel stressed and overwhelmed by it? Is there a reality that I can create that exists where my transformation gets to be full of play and pleasure and fun and connection and community? And so that is the foundation of what I've been diving into with clients, because I've been so curious about it myself, especially having approached burnout many times over. And so that's what's got my heart and my attention and my intention right now in my work is, we've done the work. We've listened to the podcast. We've read the books. We've gone to the conferences. It's time to play. Like there's no more that we have to do to prove ourselves. Not that we had to do anything in the first place. We are already perfect and whole. What would it be like if we let ourselves play, if we gave ourselves permission to play? And so that's where things are at right now.
wow. Thank you for saying that. I think that is like such a needed paradigm shift that a lot of us, especially in these spiritual communities, we get into this cycle of like, oh, like, yeah, there's just so much transformation. It's hard. I'm really in it right now. It's like we perpetuate that. And I just love that idea that it doesn't have to, like, what if it doesn't have to be hard? What if it didn't have to be painful? What if it is fun and joyful and opens us into pleasure and more joy? It reminds me of, I was watching something last night. I have a Gaia subscription, and there are all these spiritual videos that sometimes come up when I'm just searching through there. And it was this man who channels Bashar, it's called. And he was talking about how there are literally different dimensions or paradigms that we're all living in. And it's like they're all existing here at the same time. And we are elevating our consciousness into like this new level. And it's like that's why, some people on the same planet could be living in like that suffering constant place. And then it's like sometimes there can be a shift into like a new dimension or a new way of being that's like, oh, suddenly something about my vibration is stepping into a new paradigm almost. It's like they're all existing at the same time, and we can elevate ourselves through our beliefs, really. It's at the core of it. But
yeah, it really is like mind blowing to think that we have the power to create our reality, both internally and externally, it's a lot of responsibility. And it is also, once we realize that and we opt into it, it is freedom. And freedom doesn't exist outside of that. It's a moment to moment choice. And that's something that I try to remind myself of, especially when I'm getting back into, outdated mindsets or patterns or self-limiting beliefs or negative self-talk. I'm like, okay, I get to choose what I want to do in this next moment, how I want to speak to myself, how I want to relate to myself, how I want to show up in the world. And so, we are literally, stepping into new dimensions all the time.
Yes. Yes. So tell us about the Bliss Method. What is it? How do we use it? What does it entail?
Yes, it's so juicy. So I had shared that I had just created perpetual cycles of burnout for myself. And I'm sure anyone listening can resonate, especially in a big city. There is that expectation of performance and achievement, and it is the over applause of the masculine energy without the recognition of the balance of the feminine energy being incorporated in to support all of the structure. So I had realized over time that each time I had worked my way and sometimes muscled my way out of burnout back into a place of neutrality or even momentary bliss or pleasure, that I was continuing to use the same process over and over again. And when I had actually sat down to gather my experiences over decades of going through this, and when I had started to work with clients around this, I realized that it was a very similar process. And so I compiled that and I built out a program to bring women through the Bliss Method step by step. And so it's a 6-phase process, and it's really simple yet powerful. And the cornerstone of the Bliss Method is pleasure, play, presence. And so it's really, while there may be moments throughout the process that feel challenging or uncomfortable, there is still that choice to opt back into pleasure and play. And so the first part of the process is awareness and acceptance. So knowing and owning where we are, and also witnessing and releasing judgment and shame. That is something that I carried for so long, whether it was judgment and shame about who I was or how I was doing something, or even judgment and shame for not doing something well enough. The next part of the process is connecting to our physical and emotional bodies and really creating a relationship and an orientation to how our physical body and how our emotions communicate with us and send us messages. Because they're in communication with us all the time if we will stop and listen for a moment. And they will work in complement with our logic if we allow a space for them to do so. The third part is understanding our needs and desires and getting them met. So what does it look like to admit and own that we have needs and that we have desires? And what is it like to be in communication about them, to make requests for our needs and desires, and to hear and honor the needs and desires of others that we're in relationship with? The fourth part of the Bliss Method is identifying obstacles to bliss and creating conditions for success. And so bliss is less of, being in a state of bliss is less a doing and more of an allowing, more a being. So all we're doing in this part of the process is identifying what stands in the way and removing the roadblocks. And then bliss will naturally occur as a state of being, because we are infinite, blissful, joyful beings. And then creating the conditions for success. Well, how do we create an environment for ourselves internally and externally that allows bliss to be present? And then the fifth part is embodying bliss through passion, pleasure, and play. So giving ourselves permission to be empowered in bliss, to be empowered in pleasure and play. And then the last part of the method is returning to bliss and habituating it as a way of being. And so this is the part where we really acknowledge that we're not trying to achieve bliss as a permanent state. That's unrealistic. And in fact, we'd become very jaded if that were the case. So how do we return to our bliss point, or using our sort of internal GPS or internal compass to relate to what bliss feels like for us? And then how do we return to that state once we've kind of gone on a tangent or some sort of scenic route? And then how do we habituate it as a way of being? And that is, what are we doing on the subconscious level to habituate new beliefs and behaviors and patterns such that we operate naturally as a more blissful being versus perhaps as a stressed out being or as a being who is consistently burnt out? And so those are the 6 phases of the method. And the program happens over a 6-month period. And, as I've put myself through this program over and over again, I have discovered so much about myself and so much about the power of play and the power of pleasure in our transformation.
Yes, I want to hear more about that, but I have another question too that's coming up. But I wonder if you could share with us an example, or maybe someone you worked with, or maybe just with your own journey, an example of like an obstacle to bliss and how you would remove it, or how you would like take that obstacle out of the way.
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so there are a few clients that are coming to mind, and my own personal experience has always come to mind as well. So I have one client that I've been working with for a few months, and she is just a go-getter. She's on it. She's built a successful career for herself, and she's created herself from nothing. And she has just this unstoppable energy and charisma, and she has a lot of really powerful masculine energy, and has become really disconnected from her feminine energy, and as a result has approached and experienced burnout over and over again. And so something we talk about is in her day-to-day, because a lot of this, a lot of the work that she and I do together is in the realm of belief and orientation and relationship to self. And on the day-to-day, we talk about a lot of useful practices that can really act as pattern interrupts. And so while it's really useful to have a space to talk about all of the subconscious beliefs and things that we want to look at from past traumas, etc., like how do we work pragmatically to interrupt the pattern as it appears in the moment without going back into story? And so we do pattern interrupts, and something that she and I have done together is when she's become more aware of when the burnout moments start to pop up. And when they pop up for her, it manifests as clumsiness. It manifests as shortness of breath, tightness in chest. It manifests as being really scatterbrained because she's trying to do 20 things at once to please everyone, or to, meet some sort of expectation that she's put on herself. And so when she recognizes that's happening, out loud or in her mind, she'll shout, "Bam!" And she'll imagine the firework emoji. And so it's both a verbal, an auditory, and a visual sort of pattern interrupt. And that will start to shift her state. And I've used this with myself as well. And then it allows even just milliseconds of time where a choice exists that didn't appear to exist before. So the choice always exists for us as to how we want to proceed with things, yet we don't always see a choice available in our vision. So that pattern interrupt creates seconds for a choice to appear for her, and then she proceeds, okay, do I want to continue to do what I was doing the way I was doing it, or do I want to step away and take a dance break? Do I want to go for a walk? Do I want to make a cup of tea? And then at that point, the options are infinite.
Mm-hmm. That's really powerful. Yeah. And simple too, of just like having that just a sound and a visual and something that can interrupt the pattern. Like I know sometimes I can get really into working on my computer, and then suddenly I've been working an hour or two past lunch and I'm starving, and I'm just like, oh my God, what just happened? I totally lost sight of my body. And so I have to be more mindful now of like, oh, once I start to feel that little bit of hunger, it's like, needing to stop myself or shut the computer down or like get myself out of my seat and move around. So yeah, thank you for that tip.
Sure.
Yeah. So tell us more about the power of play. What have you found with that?
Oh gosh, I wish everyone could see my face right now. I am like a giddy little girl. The power of play. I mean, oh my gosh, play was something that I had become very disconnected from very early on in my childhood as a result of some of my cultural background. I grew up with a lot of Chinese influence. My mother's Chinese. And so a lot of things were very based on performance and academic achievement. And I am so grateful for that because it is a huge part of, why I am who I am today. And there was never a value or an emphasis placed on play and relaxation. And as I've, taught myself how to play as an adult, it has just worked wonders. And so ways in which I've incorporated play into my day-to-day life are taking frequent dance breaks. So, depending on where people are at in their workday, perhaps it's not something that you do in a corporate office, but maybe going into a conference room and taking a quick dance break or a movement or a stretch or a walk, something to change the physical state. So dance breaks are really helpful for me. And usually in those dance breaks, I just kind of go all out. And I won't do those dance breaks in front of a mirror because in that moment when I'm trying to incorporate play, I don't want to be concerned about how I look or if I'm on rhythm or if that move looks sexy. I just really want to be expressive as if my emotions are coming out through movement. So dance has been a big one. Going to playgrounds, if you're familiar with New York City and the East Village, I often go to Tompkins Square Park or to McCarran Park in Brooklyn, and there are monkey bars and play sets. And for so long, I thought it was beyond me to actually monkey around on the monkey bars because that's the thing children do. But as soon as I started owning that I can do that too, I was just beside myself. I have so much fun playing on playgrounds and, swinging on bars and looking clumsy or whatever it is. And that has been just a huge part of feeling free and feeling like I don't have to worry about what people around me are thinking or, how I'm being perceived. So that's been a big one. And, honestly, even really silly things, tickling someone, obviously with their permission, or being tickled is a huge one. And, as immature as it may sound, for some reason, I still crack up every time I hear a farting sound. And so when I'm really at my wit's end, I will make a farting sound with my mouth, and it pulls me immediately out of whatever funk I'm in. And, it's funny. So those are some, really easy practices. I totally encourage the farting sound one.
Yeah. Humor is so important to just help us, get out of that mind space where we can just be like so in our head and just, have fun. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I'm also curious just about your journey of entrepreneurship with sharing this in the world. And I know myself that I've had to come up against a lot of growth edges and live beyond different fears and things like that to really step into the kind of work that I want to be doing and sharing and connecting with people. So I'm just curious if there's anything that you, especially in the last year, any like fears you've faced or just how you've come up against your own edges around being your own business owner or just doing the work that you're doing and sharing yourself.
Yes. Oh, so many fears. Oh my goodness. And even in the last year alone, I mean, it feels like it's been sort of perpetual. I remember a couple weeks ago, like actually talking to the universe and being like, when am I going to catch a break? And then it dawned on me in that moment, no, I've been asking for this. I've been asking to step into a new identity. And how does that happen? But for, you know, experiences to occur for me that have me, understand what it's like to behave and act and orient to myself in a different way. And so I'd say some of the biggest fears that I have come up against over the last, in the last year have been around making big declarations. For a while I was okay not really putting myself out there, because if I didn't put myself out there and I didn't really try my hardest, then, well, it's fine. I didn't try my hardest. So if someone doesn't like it or doesn't approve, well, I didn't really put my effort in anyway. Mm-hmm. And so this was sort of the subconscious talk that was happening. And I was paralyzed by fear for so long around making a big declaration in the world about who I am or what I'm doing, what I'm up to, what I'm creating, because I feared not being able to deliver on it. Mm. And as I moved into that fear and explored it, I realized that it's much less about being able to deliver on the big declaration word for word, and more about what lengths we're willing to go to be on the journey towards a big declaration that we wouldn't have been willing to go to before had we not made a declaration at all. So it's not, it wasn't about fulfilling on the thing I said I was going to do. And if I did, hey, that was awesome. But it was about what journey I got to be on as a result of making a big claim in the world. Because I was willing to do so many more things, because I was like, okay, I said it, so let's do something about it. Yeah. So that was a really big one. And then, the fear of loss of love, the fear of rejection, the fear of loss of approval, the people pleasing thing has been such a journey for me over the years. And, starting to relate to that in new ways by creating boundaries and by, relating to my body and to my emotions in different ways, such that I understand what my needs are and making requests for those needs has been a huge one as well. And really starting to decouple, my inherent worthiness from my bank account, or from how many clients I have, or from how many likes I have on a post, or how many people showed up to a workshop. Because those moments as an entrepreneur can be both validating and trying at the same time. And to remember that none of it really means anything. It'll mean the thing that we make it mean, and we can allow it to mean something empowering, or it can mean something debilitating. And so stepping into the choice and the responsibility around how I want to create meaning in my life has been another big shift for me on the journey.
Mm-hmm. I can relate so much to lots of those. It's so important knowing that our inherent worth is not dependent on those outside circumstances. And something else I was working with a client the other day was the fear and the excitement. Like, she was getting ready to reach out to people to be on her podcast, and also for her to be on other people's podcasts. And was supporting her to create a list of like 20 people that she would just be so excited to collaborate with and connect with. And yeah, the fear of rejection, of course, comes up when we think of that too. And I was supporting her and just realizing like, wow, the fear is just here because, one, it's like unfamiliar. Two, it's like, this is really important to you and you really care. And that's like such a beautiful thing. But what if you could focus on the act of how courageous it would be to make that step, and to have those
Hmm.
requests rather than focusing on anything about the outcome, but just being like, wow, this is something that I'm dreaming about and it would be amazing to happen. And like, I think so often fear is really tied up with excitement too. And if
Mm.
we can like really breathe with it and allow those feelings of intensity to move with us, it can just, yeah, be so much easier to take the steps forward. So, yeah, thank you for sharing your journey.
Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. And just what's coming up in your business? How can people stay connected with you, and any offerings that are coming up right now that you want to share about?
Yes, yes. So to stay connected, I'm on both Facebook and Instagram. You can search my name, Lee Noto, Leenoto, and I'm at Lee Noto _ on Instagram. Um, I encourage you to also reach out through email, hello@leenoto.com, and leenoto.com is my website. Um, I am full-heartedly in this Burnout to Bliss program that I was mentioning, which uses the Bliss Method. And so I am just so enthusiastic about continuing to work with clients through that program. And so that's where my energy and attention is right now, working one-on-one with ambitious go-getter women who are, wanting to transition from burnout to bliss and still get to have the social impact, understand that they can have it all without compromising their success. Like that's the big thing that I am pushing out here is like, we get to have it all. And on top of that, we deserve to have it all. And it doesn't have to be hard to have it all. In fact, it can be a lot of fun and we get to play and connect along the way. And so that's what I'm creating now. And so I totally welcome conversations. I offer a complimentary Bliss Breakthrough conversation for anyone this resonates with. And in that conversation, it's really about uncovering, what's slowing us down or stopping us from having this life now. And, what has been the creation of the burnout in the first place. And then what possibilities we want to create with actionable, pragmatic tools so that we can, really do this. And it's not just a thing that we're talking about. And so that is where my heart and soul is at. And more to come, because I will have a podcast in the works in the next month or two.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for doing this work and sharing yourself in all these beautiful ways. I have one more question that just came up. I wonder if you could just touch on just how sensuality and sexuality maybe plays into this work, and does it have a role?
Oh, yes. Oh, I'm like shaking my head with joy. Yes. A huge passion of mine, and a work that I was doing for years and that I still incorporate into the work that I do now, because we are sexual beings. It's a very real part of us. It is how we are here. There is such a beautiful space for sensuality and sexuality in our transformation, in our healing, and in our connection. And, a lot of spiritual bodies that incorporate sexuality as a cornerstone really talk about sexuality as a way to transcend, sexual union as a way to transcend, and to really connect to source, to the divine. And there is such a place to play in sensuality and sexuality, to receive and give pleasure, to learn more about ourselves, to experience bliss. And a part of the paradigm shift that I'm really passionate about being a part of is shifting the narrative around sex and intimacy from one of fear, shame, and judgment to one of pleasure, play, and possibility, because it's totally there. And we just have not given enough space for conversation and experience in that way to occur. And so that is a huge part of bliss as a way of being. And so, yes, there's totally a space for that. And it's something that is really, really juicy and fun. And, brings us back to our sense of feminine power, which is the most powerful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for touching on that. And do you have just any closing words, any last words you'd like to share with anyone listening?
There's nothing more to do. We've done all the things. It's really now about playing, about being, about relaxing and enjoying all of the efforts and labor that we put in. Now is the time to eat the fruit and to relish and to connect. And so for anyone listening that has consistently struggled with, what do I need to do? What do I need to fix or change? What book do I need to read? I would invite you to try doing nothing, even for a short amount of time, like a week, and just seeing what comes up, seeing what space is there. Even if discomfort is in the space, that's fine too. Just seeing what's there in the acknowledgement that there's nothing left to do and that you are already whole and complete and beautiful as you are.
Wise words. Let's just take a moment to just breathe that in. And everyone listening, I'll just invite you to breathe that in and to just hold that in your hearts that you are already complete. There's nothing to do. Just resting into the beingness, the beauty that you are. Allowing your breath, your heart to guide you. And just allowing that space and inviting in more pleasure and seeing what practices or wisdom that has resonated with you today, just seeing how you might be able to bring that into your life from here. So I'll just bring my hands to my heart and bow to you, Lee. Thank you so much for your wisdom today. And to everyone listening, just sending all my love and blessings. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste.
Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to our show today. We would love to hear what you think. Take a moment to hop on over to iTunes and leave us a review. We'd be so grateful to receive it. Until next time, namaste.